Take a breath. Come ye, ye who would have peace. Come ye, ye who would have love. And then as you're ready, come back into the room together. Welcome again. Thank you. Thank you for being here on this, the most holiest of days in this country, Super Bowl Sunday. So, as you heard, I'm a chaplain at Children's Hospital. I visited a particular 6-year-old patient for the first time about 1.5 years ago. This was at the outset of my residency there. And I'll use a pseudonym for this patient. I'll use the pseudonym Oscar, because his manner was usually very grouchy, understandably. Hey, Oscar, how you doing today? Oscar, you want me to read a book? No. That didn't really sound like Oscar the Grouch, but you get the idea. But like most 6-year-old children, he did also have spurts of playfulness and silliness, albeit very infrequently. However, unlike any other 6-year-old I know, he concerned himself not, or less, with the antics of, say, Paw Patrol, which is a very popular cartoon now, than he did with the daily routines of an intensive care hospital unit. Not what a 6-year-old should be concerned with. During one visit, as I leaned over his bed with a toy, the nurse motioned to a machine near my foot on the floor. Be very careful, she cautioned. That is his heart. He had a type of ventricular assist device specifically designed for children with heart failure. As he waited, he was unable to leave his room. He lived in this room for over 1 year as he waited a heart transplant. It was likely to make up for this complete lack of privacy and control and autonomy, this complete dependence on others that defined every aspect of his existence in the hospital, that he reasonably developed his grouchy, guarded attitude. I think anyone would have. But there was one thing I learned that could always win him over, even if only briefly. Takis. Do we know what Takis are? They're snacks. They're like Doritos. They're spicy snacks called Takis. And to say that Oscar loved Takis was a gross understatement. He ate so many, I thought he was going to turn into a Taki. Fast forward just over 1 year, when Oscar was now 7, and he had successfully received his donor heart, as many of our patients do. One day, I scored some Takis, and I was so excited to bring them to Oscar to celebrate his new heart. And when he saw my offering, the expression that his face morphed into this look of just utter enchantment that I'd never seen on this 6-year-old. He took the Takis and he paused, and likely for the first time since I met him at least, he looked directly at me, and he said with this supreme sincerity of someone truly and deeply grateful, I love you. Which I received with a depth of gratitude, honestly, for which I was unprepared. In the hospital, we alternate between the terms spiritual care, pastoral care. We still haven't landed on one. But pastor also means shepherd. And it would seem from the outside observer that I was the shepherd in this instance, and Oscar was the helpless sheep. However, this relationship is troubling because shepherd-sheep immediately establishes a hierarchical power differential. In reality, however, is not the shepherd also dependent upon the sheep for their livelihood and for their ultimate contentment in life? They need the sheep as much as the sheep needs them. I tell this particular story because you can imagine how dependent he is. So it's illustrative of how the caregiver-care receiver relationship is often conceived as one with power, one dependent. But in reality, we are all dependent upon each other at all times. I was dependent upon Oscar emotionally and spiritually for that love that gives life purpose and meaning. You may ask, well, I love myself. Isn't that enough? Why are we dependent upon others for love? What about the introvert ascetic who finds peace alone, for instance, in meditation? Well, self-love, it's absolutely vital. I'd ask you, though, to imagine yourself finding that complete inner peace and loving yourself fully in a world where you are completely alone. What then is the purpose? We love ourselves in order to be strong enough to interact lovingly with others. I realized in that moment of exchange of the talkies of love, I should have called the sermon. In that moment with Oscar, I realized how, when I myself am often in a neutral state or even a deflated state of spirit, accompanying my routine circumstances of my quotidian existence, I often need desperately those life-giving moments of honest, loving connection with another person. Yes, I was still the shepherd in this scenario, but I was also the sheep. And so was he. In that instance of loving connection that we have, in the instance of loving connection with Oscar, I clearly, that moment, that day, perceived the interdependent web which connects us all. Love dependency means always alternating between sheep and shepherd. For those of you who need another more relatable analogy specific today, it means always simultaneously being the 49ers and the Chiefs. In the hospital, spiritual care is defined as supporting another with compassion during life's transitions. And there are a lot of significant transitions in the hospital. But we're always transitioning, even from one moment to the next. So we are always in need of spiritual care. And we are always also caring for each other's spirits, always. That is the warp and the weft of the love-dependent web of which we all are a part. Can you put up the new Article 2 image? Our new Article 2 image that was created for our new purposes and principles in our bylaws depicts this web. There it is. Our current principles, including interdependence, which is up there at the top, if you can't see it, they're placed in this way as circumambient strands of a web held together by love at the center. It's a great image. And as Pamela said, we worship together this morning, calling forth the sacred and the spiritual in the question, how do we spin? Do we strengthen? Do we upkeep this love-dependent web of all existence? To answer that how question, let's think more about love as spiritual care of each other. Unlike purely logistical support, in attending to spiritual care, one must first envision and embrace spirit, what spirit is. And humanists and atheists, prepare yourselves, the divine, as you understand it. As a humanist, a religious naturalist myself, I acknowledge the collective human spirit, representative of meaning that can be found in the world and can be found in nature, in our connection to the earth, in relationships. The getting together is more important than the game, thank you. And in doing good by giving of ourselves. I acknowledge a connection to the larger and profound divine that is this living energy that pervades all life within and between us all. So recognizing that divine in each of us, spiritual care is then about supporting that divinity with love. Further, as the theologian Thomas Merton put it, our job is also to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. The author Brené Brown frames this as loving wholeheartedly, even if it hurts. It's difficult. Thus, love dependency is first about a courageous human connection, spirit to spirit, that is not easy, but's necessary. And what's more, as much as we need love, by demanding it or expecting it from others, I caution you, we sever the web. It's not effective. This leaves us with only one option: to ensure loving connection from others, we must initiate it ourselves. It may not always be returned, but only by loving others can we assure that it will ever be returned. Loving others is also complex, as I said. It's difficult, and it's even potentially harmful. One of the first learning assignments I was given when I was a ministerial intern, was to preach for 10 minutes on my personal theology using a single concept. I had to come up with one concept as my personal theology and preach on it. This was when I was an intern. And the concept I came up with was free hugs. In the same way, though, that loving is risky, that framing of my personal theology as free hugs also held potential for harm. Not everyone can give or receive hugs, physically or even emotionally. There are considerations of consent involved with hugging. Unsolicited hugs can cause pain. Even with consent, we cannot expect that someone will hug back with the same intensity. So I gave that sermon back in 2019, and I could not have foreseen that very soon thereafter, in 2020, hugging another human might severely sicken them and even be considered a malicious act. Therefore, I have since reconceived my personal theology. At least for now, we're always in process. I've reconceived it as offering free spiritual hugs. To recap, the how of spinning this love-dependent web begins with recognizing the divine in another and loving by offering courageous spiritual hugs. That's the how so far. Let's talk about the web for a minute, the imagery of the web itself. In her book, Liberalism and Colonial Violence, Charting a New Genealogy of Spiritual Care, Helena Moon refers to Foucault, Michel Foucault, who described his description of the work to care for humanity. In lieu of shepherd, Foucault states, quote, "So the royal art is the art of the weaver, which is an art that consists in bringing together these lives in a community that rests on concord and friendship. He reframed it from the shepherd to the weaver. Helena Moon delves deeper to highlight the radical work that it takes to weave this web in a society like ours, where in the spinning of the web, forms of hatred must be dismantled. She points to W.E.B. Du Bois' warning that just as some of us need love because we are literally trapped, we all can become entombed souls in our own spheres of self-imposed captivity that hinders our own liberation. And this results in self-harm because we neglect the greater world. If we're not participating in that love-dependent web and content to be isolated, we can result in self-harm. What's more, Moon sees the web as what the author Bonnie Miller Micklemore calls the living human web, because it's not static. It's constantly being rewoven through the practice of agentive and cooperative loving care. The strands of the web that connect us through, as was in the image, through interdependence and equity and transformation and pluralism and generosity and justice, as Article 2 image depicts. The strands of the web that connects us through love, and all of those will weaken on occasion, as we know. But even if one or more of these strands is severed, in a web, if you can picture a web, the web remains intact. It weakens, and it necessitates ever diligent reimagining and reweaving to strengthen it again. So some of these can be severed, but we have to continue to work to reweave them, because even when they're severed, the web is still supportive, just more precarious. Now that we hopefully have a better understanding of the love-dependent web, and you can take the image down, thank you, because I don't know if the people online can see me with the image, but it's all right. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to facilitate just a short ritual to better understand this love-dependent web. I'd like you to imagine I'm going to start spinning the web from where I am. I love that you're actually weaving right now, Pamela. And I'm going to start spinning the web, and I'm going to spin it toward another person. Please either accept that, hold on a piece of this web, imagine holding this string of this web, and pass the end on to someone else, spin it to someone else. Or, if you feel like it, simply allow the web to pass by you and to the next person, if in the moment you're uncomfortable taking this string. So I'm going to spin it to you, and you please spin it to somebody else. And online, imagine we're spinning this web to each other. One by one, see the strands connecting each other. And as the strands connect, imagine sensing and connecting with and absorbing divine humanity that connects us all. This web is that energy, that divine humanity connecting one to the other. That energy of life that sustained and strengthened our ancestors and continues to flow through us and into future generations. Envision that. Imagine that here and now, this strings that connect us represent your energy and the energy of others commingling, filling the physical space in the sanctuary and traveling through the wires and signals to enter and fill the virtual spaces that connect us. Imagine this web here now. And when you do, be in it together. Be in that energy. Have faith that unconditional love will provide what is needed to keep that web between us taut and to support us all. And like I said, even if there are those who for whatever reason cannot or do not wish to hold the string in the moment, they are still also surrounded and also supported by our web, by the greater web of life and love. Because as the world fights literal wars, as well as ideological and moral wars that divide humanity more violently than I've seen in over half a century of life, as ties between friends and loved ones are severed by the weapons of hate and fear, there will be holes in this web we're imagining. In spite of and because of this, the rest of us must continue to deploy that love that we all depend on and continue to respin and reimagine this web, this love-dependent web. Witness this web around you. And as you do, I'm actually going to reread the call to worship because we can envision it a little differently now that we have this woven web. Dr. Sherry Prudhomme wrote, "With love stitched in from the beginning, ancestors, and sewn throughout the piecing and the mending across the decades, even a worn and ragged quilt provides strength, inspiration, courage, and solace through the long night." Now, the time to argue and change the mind of many who have been swayed by disinformation and fear-mongering, that may be past, I don't know, for certain people. But attending to a person's heart and spirit with unconditional love, engulfing them in a spiritual hug, giving them some talkies of love, weaving them into the web of love is frankly the only way to successfully retaliate against hatred and fear. Yes, love is complex and it's difficult. Building a community, a beloved community in our faith and in the world at large is difficult. It takes a level of courage, especially today, that has heretofore been more elusive than we care to admit. But as the theologian Paul Tillich says, love is the drive toward the unity of the separated, to reconnect and make whole that which has become or appears fragmented. And so, as the life Unitarian Universalists aspire to, as humanity, all of humanity aspires to, enters into our field of perception, it is incumbent upon each of us to take hold of our part of the web with every ounce of spiritual strength we can muster and spin it out with that same strength as a spiritual hug toward each other intensely, to know the world we want and the world we need. Our faith must commit to setting the example of how to construct this love-dependent web by loving more courageously than the world has ever known. Shall we begin now? Does anyone have any talkies?